financial systems. What we have built in the past 30 plus years is massive batch processes that do this for us. Right? So you have business processes, you have intermediaries. That gives us the notion of trust. But what happens in the process is that you have opacity of information for the duration of the time when the asset moves from one ledger entry to another ledger entry. And that opacity leads to fraud, that leads to cost. And so you have a lot of intermediaries to pop up, and you can pick any industry, and you realize that you have a lot of intermediaries who are promising to do things faster for a fee, who are promising to give you the fact that you trust me and I'll do it for you cheaper, faster, better. And what that leads to is a complex kind of ecosystem driven by, again, movement of value across the ecosystem. Now, I want to reflect on a few numbers because we have to use numbers to justify a system for your ICT or your corporate world or your innovation entities. I looked at this. This is, again, a combination of some of the research that we have done at the Economic Forum, and I was at Davos this year, and it's really interesting in places like Davos. You have this massive institutions who are trying to figure out the fate of the poor and the refugees and focus on gender equality. And then you have, bang opposite of that whole movement, you have this blockchain world that's emerging, which is sole purpose is to de-establish some of the old establishments, right? So these numbers pop up, and to me, a few things is interesting. As a technology company, the 2.3 billion number is interesting, right? That's the addressable market space that I can look into. I can look into tech, I can sell technology, I have services. This is Accenture, Deloitte, all my cohorts and colleagues who are with me at the panel. That number is interesting. But what's more interesting, which is what I described in my panel session, is the 176 billion number. Because that's what I want to focus on, things that don't exist today. The value that I want to create from the things that I'm building on blockchain network. Right? And the value could be, again, the fact that I may disintermediate many entities, the fact that I may create new intermediaries. What is that value creation by compressing time and by instituting trust in the system that we're building? Right? At the end of the day, that's the most interesting part to me, and that number is arbitrary because how do you evaluate something that you don't know about? Like, to me, that's a much larger number, given the fact that we have come this far. It took us almost 10 years to do meaningful things with the internet. Early days of the websites, we were giving out website numbers, and eventually we had protocols. We began to build security protocol layers, and we began to bank and buy internet tickets, and so on and so forth, but not realizing that that network was never designed to move value. So we are still moving information about the value that's stored and locked in the system. So what is it? What are we trying to do with blockchain? Now, I'm not going to define blockchain. To me, from a technology standpoint, I'm not going to define it to be just Bitcoin or Ethereum. To me, blockchain does these few things. It is a platform for disintermediation. In the enterprise world, we don't want to talk about it, but it is what it is. It is a trusted digital transaction system. I wrote a paper on this topic of co-creation, and that is the most interesting part, that you're trying to derive synergies between multiple ecosystems, or multiple parties who are transacting in a network, that you're able to identify synergies that didn't exist before. Right? And I can give you a few examples as we are building these systems for the globe. But eventually we are trying to, again, create a massive digital marketplace with trusted transactions, allowing multiple parties to communicate without need of an intermediary. Right? Which begs the question, who the hell is an intermediary? So that's something which we begin to tackle in the enterprise space. You have banks, you have financial institutions, you have clearinghouses, you have exchanges, whose sole purpose is to connect two parties, a buyer, a seller, and everything in between is an intermediary. Financial services, your banks. You trust your bank, you deposit your money, there are rules that govern movement of money, that protects you, but your bank is still an intermediary. If I'm able to adhere to those regulations, adhere to governance models, using cryptocurrencies, then I can still solve the problem. Banks are still the intermediaries, for example, right? So then it becomes that fact that we're not trying to disintermediate banks, the roles of banks may change. Banks may become a identity verification system. Bank may be the custodians of your digital money, for example. Banks may be the entities that allow you and facilitate you to safekeep your valuables. And it doesn't have to be money. It can be a tokenized version of your stocks, your bonds, security. You can have a single account and manage these things because they are value elements. So that begs another question, reflective of, again, time and trust. These are active use cases that me and my team globally are working on. Use cases that have been verified, validated, defined, going much above and beyond the notion of digital fiat or cash. So you'll find banking, supply chain, healthcare, manufacturing, insurance, governance. There are n number of use cases that I can determine using the underlying tech of Bitcoin blockchain, essentially. So how can I divorce the cryptocurrency elements for certain of these use cases to be able to institute the same level of trust that we have already? Now, that translates into some of the active work that we are doing, and these are our list of our referenceable clients. That, again, I'll tell you something else, that I used to be a younger looking guy. The only gray hair I have the past 4 years I've been working this for the enterprise space. Because it is, I mean, the thing is that I go to these events, I go to conferences, I hear about the ICO pitches. I think the world has oversimplified the underlying complexity that blockchain consists of, right? And that's okay, because we have to understand the tech, we have to define it. But remember, we are building a trust network. So when we design a system, we have to institute to make sure that things like what we've seen with DAO hack or Ethereum challenge should not happen by using the right tech. So if you design the system right, I should not be able to move asset by mistake. Just like today, and this could be a bit controversial, but just like today, I should not be able to send money by mistake to an account which doesn't match a name, for instance. It happens, but I shouldn't be able to do it, right? So each of these entities, and some of them are in production. This is the interesting part, because what the hell is a production use case anyway if you have just 5 transactions on it? And if some of them are production networks, then why isn't the economy moving to blockchain? And the reason for that is, when we say production, we say it's a limited production, and you have 2 or 3 entities who have said, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to invest into it. Only because 1, it changes life. 2, it's going to disrupt my industry, so I'm going to get my arms around it. And they actually have put real assets on these networks and moved them across. And it's not just on blockchain. So most solutions that we're designing, blockchain is a component of that. It's a transaction system, which means we rely upon various security technologies, we rely upon IoT to track and trace and do all these things. So to me, blockchain is not the end all. We still have to embark and exploit the technology advancements we've made in the past 30 plus years. Right? So the solution design that we work with, or that me and my team spend enormous amount of time, is less about technology first, but it's focusing on what the design should be, what are the design principles that we have to institute in this network. So this is another one, right? So right now, and this is the $178 or $176 billion potential, new economy, new values that we create. We are working, and this is public news. We have announced things with Maersk, which is the global trade. This is again tracking and tracing. We have a network of financial services, WeTrade, which is a European entity, which means that it's a trade it's a trade sort of network that's happening. And then you have this consumer industry that can sit on these networks and begin to do interesting things. So for example, and this is a real story, and I've followed avocados from Peru all the way to Philadelphia and into Walmart in a value chain. It's true, I actually have done that. And the question then becomes, if you lose track of a container of avocados, they have a shelf life. So 2 days impact. There's a huge cost element to it. It's a few $1 million if you lose a container of avocados. And that happens too. And so you have a track and trace, and US now, which is the work we do with Walmart, is around food safety, just like with airline parts. The food and drug safety requirement in the US is about tracking and tracing where your food has been. And this was primarily a requirement for meats, but now it's become everything that you eat has to be tracked and traced. So in the event of a non-compliance, I'm able to track and trace where the foods come from. So entities like CDC and health sort of entities can take right actions to prevent that from happening again. The idea there becomes that you have these containers of avocados that move from Peru to Philadelphia, which is one of the biggest port for agricultural products in the United States. And from there it enters the distribution systems of Walmart, Target, and the various grocery chains that we have. So that's 2 networks. Tracking and tracing containers, going from different parts of the merge, the port authority and everything else, coming into the United States, going to food safety network. The value creation in this case begins to happen when I can start doing interesting things like supply chain financing, because suddenly I have transparency, I have visibility of where things are. I can de-risk, which is the short-term working capital loans that these small growers can get, because now the avocado track is traceable, they're moving on time, they're on target. So the risk, every time you meet a important timeline or important task, you get paid a certain amount of money. And that's a new business stream for banks, which didn't exist before. It was fairly straightforward mechanism that I'm going to give you the 30, 60, 90-day payments after the goods reach a certain point. But now, because I have visibility to it, because there is certainty of a transaction or of a shipment reaching its destination on time, I can guarantee that payment. I can start working on working capital loans, supply chain financing, inventory financing, and everything else that is still there, but it's highly risky. So to me, the wholesale, the retail, the cattle farms, the entire ecosystem can benefit from it and create new economies of scale that is not in the system. So until now, this is all the enterprise world. This is regulated industries, massive hierarchy, chains. You have people whose job is to create this PowerPoint charts and things like that. But then you have this crazy world of crypto world, right? And whatever we've done with all those use cases in all the enterprises of all our clients, there is an ICO, there is a new entity embarking on blockchain trying to disrupt that, including our own business, which is technology. So you have platforms who are competing with what we would call a commercial offering, right? So everything that you look here, right, there's middleware, dev tech, protocol infrastructure, capital liquidity, which is addressing a sliver of the entire industry groups that exist today. Does anybody know how many blockchain startups you have today in New York alone? What's the guess, man? Oh, yeah.
735,000.
No, that's the wrong answer. There are about 4,000 in New York City alone.
4,000?
I made the number up, but it's plausible. The point is that you have a company that's trying to disrupt, every element of the industry. So how do we understand the divide? What's going on? Right? On one side, you have every industry, and by the way, everyone has a blockchain use case, which makes the job of people like me harder. Because Bitcoin can stand here. I'm calling you because you called me out, right? Bitcoin can stand here and say Bitcoin is a catch-all, end-all. But to me, the problem that I have is bridging the divide, understanding what's happening in this crypto world with what's happening in every single industry that's trying to reinvent itself. So to me, it's a bridge between transformation and disruption. And I believe they will converge. I believe that some of the things that you were talking about will prevail, but we are on a spectrum. So Rome was not built in a day. So for all the things that you're talking about, which is scalability, economic inclusion, having access to wealth, access to money by every common man, will happen, but we have to progress this on a spectrum. So from that perspective, I look at the disruptive side of the house, where we have the difference between permission and permissionless. We have this massive ecosystem that relies upon entities like, for example, sidechain and trying to act as follows. But in most cases, it has to be enterprise scale ready, right? So the divide to me is a convergence pattern where, fintech has been there for some years now. Right? We've been talking about fintechs. Fintech is financial technology, and in most cases, fintechs were addresses challenger banks, the term the industry gave them. But in most cases now, I think there's a realization that banks need fintechs and fintechs needs banks. Whether it's regulation, whether it's innovation, cost of capital, there are a number of things that are happening in that space. So that divide is really important to understand, because to me, what's happening in the crypto world is enormously interesting from a technology perspective. Like what we're doing, the evolution that both Bitcoin, Ethereum, Neo, and many of the likes, what they're doing with the protocol layer, is essentially eliminating the clutter. At least now we know what works and what doesn't work, what addresses the scale. Can we do things like Lightning Network and not address the liquidity challenge of the bank? Right? That's a direct correlation between a business problem and the technical solution that's behind it. Right? And that's exactly what we have to understand from a divide perspective. So to me, the role of the disruptive element is enormously interesting, because there are amazing technical innovation happening in that space. And what I would want to do is rob that, steal it, and use it effectively to address two fundamental elements: scale and economic viability. Because until we have these two, none of the networks, Bitcoin included, will never be successful. Things have to be cheap. Things have to be scalable. Things have to be affordable, right? From a transaction perspective. So that brings an interesting challenge, because I do spend time on token economics, right? There's a, having virtual currency is not new. We've had this for ages. I mean, you don't get paid in cash all the time. You store money in ledger entries in our banks. We move money, and we hardly see cash. But in some countries, you do have cash. We do talk about, there's a notion of settlement coin, which is a systemic currency. Loyalty points, essentially, are an element that carries value. So when we begin to introduce new things in the system, whether it's tokens or whether it's coins or some manifestation of something in between the two, we are introducing new complexities. Complexity driven by technology, complexity driven by regulation, complexity driven by the fact that something, if we are building a value network and something is tokenizing it, who really provides the value, who can stand behind it, who's liable for doing the wrong things or making the wrong claims, essentially. So, between all this confusion and 60,000 ICOs, I also made that number up, by the way. That's out there.
I think you're right.
60,000 plus ICO, right? So between the 60,000 ICOs and between all that we are doing in this enterprise world, we have to, at some point, I want to go back to basics. I want to go back to saying, what are we solving for? Going back to, again, my litmus test of time and trust. And figuring out is, okay, let's go back to fundamental basic tenets of blockchain. Trade, trust, ownership. Whatever we're doing, you have to have these three elements in the blockchain network, which means I already have a database. I don't need another one called the blockchain. You have to address the duality of a transaction. So most of the POCs, what demo you see, they talk about moving an asset from point A to point B. But what they don't address is something has to, it's a transaction. There's always a duality to a transaction. You buy a house, you sell a house, you buy a car, money has to move, or something of equivalent value, or tokenized value has to move in the other direction too. So, we have to focus on digital assets. What is a digital asset? To me, whatever we do in the blockchain world has to start and end with a digital asset. Whether the asset is your identity, asset is your house, asset is your securities, or a manifestation of security or derivatives, there has to be an asset. Then identity, which is completely ignored, by the way, and there's a lot of confusion in this space. I am working on a paper that hopefully going to clarify this whole thing. Then if I'm dealing with claim of an asset, dealing with the ability for me to assign the ownership of an asset or digital asset, I need to have digital identity, which is, again, addressing elements like non-repudiation, establishing ownership, verifying a claim that you make on the property, right? And eventually, which is 90% of financial service use cases, last year Wall Street announced 345 plus POCs. I also made the number up, just joking. It's true, about 345 plus POCs, but they haven't gone to production. Is because of the fact that if we are only doing reconciliation, then we've solved the issue of time, which is we've moved from an asynchronous to a more synchronous data dissemination model. We haven't really solved the issue of time, trust, asset ownership, and so on and so forth. So what are we really solving if you're simply reconciling the ledger entries between the parties? But that's a step. That's a step in the right direction. We understand the technique we want, and in many cases, this will be actually going to become essential. My last slide, the 60th one that I promised you, is around my focus. So last year, after all the drinking was done, after Christmas is being here, I figured, okay, what's my focus? Because with large corporations, and I'm sure folks from Oracle and Deloitte can resonate with me, we can spend all your life in getting caught up in the corporate work that we do and answer, be on endless conference calls, but I had to figure out, so what's my focus for blockchain? And these are the 6 things I'm focusing on this year and for the foreseeable future, because to me, they found some of the foundational element of what we need to solve as a community. Digital identity, super important. If I'm dealing with things of value, I need to be able to assign hold parties accountable. And for example, the cryptocurrency world attempts to do digital wallets, but I can't have 800 wallets in my pocket. I have to identify myself and assign the ownership of an asset. Digital fiat, really important part, because what we begin to see now is addressing the duality of a transaction. Oftentimes, I'm building a blockchain system, I'm moving an asset, and yet I'm waiting for 2 weeks for the money to move on the normal rails, ACH, cards, or whatever the case is. Which means that I have to address some notion of tokenized money, whether it's driven by central bank, which is a conversation we had in the panel, or driven by creating a systemic token mechanism. I do have to focus on asset tokenization. It's a really, really important part of where we want to address this from a technical perspective. Right, so for those of you who are aspiring for this whole ICU and new business model, this is a really, really hot space. That if I were to do something on my own, I would focus on that piece, because that is the foundation of all the blockchain networks that are in town. Secure design, business of blockchain, business model, this is a purely enterprise problem. But I have many POCs come to a complete screeching halt because they don't have a business model, who's going to fund it, who's going to pay it, who's going to run for this network, because they're not an application of the network. The last thing, governance model. And the reason why this is really important, because for enterprise people, enterprise blockchain, 50% of your cost, 50, half of your cost, will go into governance, which means policies, dispute resolution. And in many cases, the governance structure in Ethereum and Bitcoin is managed by the systemic currency itself. There are checks and balances built into it. If we aspire to mimic that system, which is the hard part, without the cryptocurrency system, that's where we chew up a lot of time in the enterprise space. With that, I do want to thank you for your time and attention. I can speak for days on this topic, but I was given 20 minutes and I chewed up more than 100 things. So thank you for your time. Very good.
See, we're all friends, really. Terrific.